Okay, I'm Lincoln Wolfenstein, and I came to Carnegie Mellon University, which was Carnegie Tech, in 1948, and finally in 1960 I became a full professor, and one of my colleagues was Michel Beranger, and he we talked and often talked together, and at one point told me about this idea of having physicists get together. The real point, I think, was that by that time, most of us had research grants. We had grants that gave us summer salary. That took a while before that kind of thing developed, but the National Science Foundation gradually became bigger, and Department of Energy, and so people had those summer research, and so it was very interesting how to make good use of that time. And one of the ways, as I discussed with Michel, really was if we could get together with other physicists from other institutions. Many of us, didn't have so many colleagues to talk to, and getting together with people from other institutions seemed like a very good idea. So I was very enthusiastic about the idea when it came up. And I didn't know anything about Aspen, really. I didn't ski, and I wasn't a mountain climber, so I didn't know, like some of these other people did, about Aspen. But the whole thing sounded like a good idea, and so it happened then that there was George Stranahan, who was just a graduate student, who, of course, was one of the beginners of this idea because he had the real Aspen connection. And Michel knew Mike Cohn. I didn't really know Mike Cohn, but Michel, Mike Cohn, and I became sort of the executive committee to try to start this thing. And when it looked like it really could happen, we said, well, we better write to people and talk to people about coming in the summer, the next summer. This was 1961. And so we wrote a sort of funny letter that said, we think there may be an institute. We'd like to get some people who would commit themselves to come, even though we still weren't sure that the whole thing would exist, but we wanted them to commit themselves all the same. And so I wrote to various people I knew, and there was a to and fro about people who said they would come, many of them coming for a good deal of the summer. My colleague Julius Ashkin, a very good friend of mine, said he would come. And then it really happened. It was sort of amazing to us. I mean, at least Michel and I certainly weren't kind of organizational kind of people. I've never been wonderful at administration or organization. And yet it happened. Of course, we had the advantage that the Aspen Institute was part of the Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies. And so it came to be, and I drove out with my wife and 4 children all the way across the country from Pittsburgh. I never did that again. I always flew ever since, but we made it, and we had a very nice big house. At that time, everybody lived in most of the rentals were houses. They didn't have all those condos at that time. And it was a small town feeling. Streets on this side, most of them weren't paved. I forget if there was 1 or 0 traffic lights in town, maybe 1. And so we were here for most of the summer. I have to confess, went off to Geneva. There was a very important meeting in Geneva that summer. And some people who we asked to come said, well, they really couldn't come because of the meeting in Geneva. But I said I did come and went away for a week, left my wife and all those kids, and went to Geneva. I think my wife's sister came to visit during that time. So we learned to love Aspen that summer, and we've been back many times. We didn't really get back again, I think, till 1967 for various reasons. Particularly, I was going to Geneva, to CERN for a sabbatical. But we've been here many, many summers since then. I was somewhat more senior than Michel. I was fairly reasonably well known. In fact, I was at that same year that Aspen, it was the next year. I turned down a professorship at Yale. I don't know how much that had to do with it, really. It really was just, it really was a bootstrap operation. You knew somebody, other people knew, and for years, I know, we would come at the beginning of the summer and say, how are we going to run this thing all summer? We don't have very much money. It really was a bootstrap operation to know, as many people have noted, people kept approaching the National Science Foundation and this famous, infamous man named Wayne Gruner, and he thought this was, just sort of a mountain vacation, and he wasn't going to give us any money. And so somehow it happened, and of course the connection to the Aspen Institute clearly helped, and then we brought in, from one way or another, through various contexts, prominent people, Henry Primakoff and of course Hans Bethe, and that of course was very helpful in improving our reputation. So I don't know that I played any very big role in that. And certainly at the beginning it was just which people we got together, and as people became enthusiastic, then they came, part of the advantage was they came from all over the country, so it got known and we got friends in many different places. But it really was, for most of us, we're real amateurs in this business of, we really weren't professional organizers or department chairmen or that kind of people. And I've always looked back and just amazed that the whole thing worked. Of course, one big advantage was that was the Fermilab people coming. They decided that was a good place to work on setting up Fermilab, and of course gave us this additional building, and of course gave us the connection to Fermilab. Later on, I was in the program committee for Fermilab, and they chose to meet her every summer, so that gave notoriety too. And I would come and go to the program committee, which was centered on the other side of town, and then come to this side of town when the program committee was done. I think the main thing is, over time, it became known that a lot of physics was done here. A lot of we of course told everyone to recognize if they wrote a paper, thanks Aspen Physics for Center for where they got together on this. And I certainly got together with people. One of the notable one was with a man named Manny Pascos, who came here, and we worked. It was just the beginning of the gauge theory, the standard model, before it was the standard model. And we worked out some relationships among neutrino cross-sections, and it's been known ever since as the Pascos-Wolfenstein relation, quoted, referred to still in papers today. And that was done just because we met at Aspen. We would never have gotten together otherwise. I saw Manny not so long ago in Dortmund, where he's been professor for many years, and there was a celebration in his honor, and I went. A lot of people got together here. I mean, that's, you see, one of the things is that one is in an institution, one's teaching. You may go once in a while to another place to see somebody. Every 7 years you may get a sabbatical, but there are all sorts of other people around the country who have common interests or might have common interests, and getting together with them is great. And meeting people you might never have met before. And so that's been a big thing, I think, for the Aspen Center. Now, for the first years, there was no program. We didn't say this is particle physics for these weeks or condensed matter program. There were no programs. We just had people got together. And the idea, in fact, sort of the feeling was, no, not too much organization, not too many talks. A lot of talking, but not many talks, if you know what I mean, not formal lectures. It's moved somewhat away from that, both because physics, there's so many people in physics now and so many people in each specialty that you feel you'd like to get a representative sample of particle physics at a given time, that would really help. And so it probably isn't a bad idea. So some people, I think, look back to the time when there was a little less organization. But still, we think most of the work doesn't get done in formal meetings. It gets done sitting at the picnic tables and talking. And even walking up in the mountains is where the work really gets done, and not in the more formal meetings. Certainly many members of my family have been here over the years. My granddaughter Jessica, I have pictures of her in the snow up at Independence Pass, and her experience here, I think, led her eventually to go to the University of Colorado, where she graduated and met her present husband. And that was the connection to Colorado, was, I think, coming here. And I have many pictures of her here in Aspen. So many of my children and grandchildren have spent time in here at different times. My collaborations with Ernest Henley started here. I've had a number of collaborations with him. We were even going to write a book together, but books never happen. When I start a book, but I never finish it. But we did write a number of papers together. And it was here I learned about the work of Gelman, Ramon, and Slansky that was done here on neutrino masses. And that got me very interested in how neutrino masses are generated. In fact, that's something I'm working on right now again, on the origins of neutrino masses. And of course, then there were no neutrino masses, but now we have them, and so it's a very exciting field. And I did ask then Dick Slansky, who I of course met here, to come and talk in Pittsburgh about that idea. So I'm sure there are many others, people who I've met and talked to here, but those are some of them.